A diary that changed everything. The morning sun filtered through the tall glass windows of Harrison and Webb Financial Corporation, casting long shadows across the polished marble floors. Marcus Harrison stood in the center of the lobby, his leather briefcase in one hand and his phone in the other. He was the youngest CEO the company had ever seen, and everyone knew it. At 34, he had built a reputation for being brilliant, decisive, and completely focused on results. Nothing distracted him from his goals. Nothing slowed him down. Marcus was reviewing emails when he felt a small tug on his sleeve. He looked down, slightly annoyed, to find a little girl standing beside him. She couldn't have been more than 5 years old, wearing a pink dress with white lace trim and small white shoes that were scuffed at the toes. Her brown hair was pulled back in a ponytail, and her eyes were wide and uncertain. "Excuse me, sir," she said in a soft voice that barely rose above a whisper. "Can you read this for me? It's important." Marcus glanced around the lobby, looking for whoever was supposed to be watching this child. The security guard at the desk was on the phone. A few employees hurried past, their eyes on their own phones and tablets. No one seemed to notice the little girl at all. "Where are your parents?" Marcus asked, his tone brisk and businesslike. The girl held up a small notebook with a worn fabric cover. "My mommy said someone should read this. She said it's important. Can you please read it?" Marcus checked his watch. He had a board meeting in 15 minutes. He had 3 conference calls scheduled after that. He did not have time to deal with a lost child, no matter how polite she seemed. "You need to talk to security," he said, pointing toward the desk. "They'll help you find your mother." The little girl's face fell, but she didn't move away. Instead, she held the notebook higher, stretching her arms up toward him. "Please," she said, "my mommy really wanted someone to read it. She said it would help people understand." Something in her voice made Marcus pause. Perhaps it was the earnestness in her expression, or the way her small hands trembled slightly as she held the notebook. Against his better judgment, he took it from her. The cover was soft, like cloth, and it felt fragile in his hands, as if it had been opened and closed countless times. "What's your name?" Marcus asked, his voice a little softer now. "Emma," the girl replied. "Emma Clark." Marcus opened the notebook. The pages were filled with handwritten entries, the writing small and neat. The first page was dated 3 years earlier. He began to read, expecting to find a shopping list or perhaps a child's homework assignment. What he found instead made him forget about his meeting entirely. The diary belonged to Sarah Clark, Emma's mother. The first entries were happy, filled with joy about Emma's birth and the simple pleasures of being a new mother. Sarah wrote about Emma's first smile, her first word, her first steps. She wrote about how Emma loved to dance in the kitchen when music played, and how she would fall asleep holding her favorite stuffed rabbit. But as Marcus turned the pages, the tone began to change. Sarah wrote about feeling tired all the time, about headaches that wouldn't go away, about visits to doctors who couldn't quite figure out what was wrong. She wrote about medical bills piling up, about insurance that didn't cover everything, about having to choose between paying for tests and paying for rent. Marcus kept reading. The entries became shorter, the handwriting a little shakier. Sarah wrote about being diagnosed with a brain tumor. She wrote about the treatment options that might save her life but would cost more money than she could ever hope to earn. She wrote about applying for help from various organizations, about filling out forms and waiting for responses that never came. One entry struck Marcus particularly hard. Sarah had written, "Today I tried to get financial assistance from Harrison and Webb Financial. I called 3 times. Each time, I was transferred to someone new. Each time, I had to explain everything from the beginning. Each time, I was told that my case didn't meet their criteria. The last person I spoke with didn't even let me finish explaining. He said they had policies and procedures, and there were no exceptions. He said it wasn't personal, just business. But it is personal. It's my life. It's Emma's future." Marcus felt something cold settle in his chest. He remembered the company's charitable foundation. He had approved its budget himself, proud of how much money the company donated each year. But he had never looked closely at how that money was distributed, at who decided which cases were worthy and which were not. He had trusted his staff to handle it efficiently, the same way he trusted them to handle everything else. He turned more pages. Sarah wrote about Emma, about wanting to see her grow up, about worrying what would happen to her daughter when she was gone. She wrote about teaching Emma to be brave, to be kind, to ask for help when she needed it. She wrote about this notebook, about how she hoped someone would read it and understand that behind every rejected application, every declined request, every closed door, there was a real person with a real story. The last entry was dated 2 weeks ago. It simply said, "I'm running out of time. If you're reading this, please remember that every decision you make affects someone's life. Please remember that efficiency and compassion don't have to be opposites. Please remember Emma." Marcus closed the notebook slowly. He looked down at Emma, who was watching him with those wide, serious eyes. "Where is your mother now?" he asked gently. "She's in the hospital," Emma said. "My grandma is with her. Grandma brought me here today because Mommy wanted someone to read her diary. She said maybe if someone important read it, they would understand." Marcus knelt down so he was at Emma's level. Up close, he could see that her pink dress, while clean and carefully pressed, was worn thin at the collar. Her shoes, despite being polished, had small holes near the toes. This was a child whose family had been taking care of her with whatever resources they had left. "Emma," Marcus said quietly, "I'm going to help your mother. And I'm going to make sure that what happened to her doesn't happen to other people. Do you understand?" Emma nodded, and for the first time that morning, she smiled. Marcus stood up and called his assistant. He cancelled his morning meetings. He called the head of the company's charitable foundation and asked for an immediate review of Sarah Clark's case. He called the hospital where Sarah was being treated and authorized the company to cover all her medical expenses. Then he asked his driver to take Emma back to her grandmother. Before Emma left, she looked up at Marcus one more time. "Thank you," she said simply. "Mommy said most people are good. They just forget sometimes." Over the following weeks, Marcus changed the way Harrison and Webb Financial handled charitable requests. He created a new review process that included personal interviews, not just paperwork. He hired staff members whose job was to listen to people's stories, to understand their circumstances, to look beyond the numbers and see the humans behind them. He established an emergency fund for cases that needed immediate help. Sarah Clark survived. The treatment was successful, and though her recovery was slow, she grew stronger each day. Marcus visited her once in the hospital, bringing Emma with him. Sarah cried when she saw her daughter holding his hand, and she thanked him for reading her words, for truly listening. Marcus kept Sarah's diary in his office, in a frame on his desk where he could see it every day. It reminded him that success wasn't just about profits and efficiency. It was about the lives his decisions touched, the families his choices affected, the difference between closing a door and opening one. He had always believed that nothing could distract him from his goals. But Emma and her mother's diary had taught him something more important. Sometimes the most important thing you can do is let yourself be interrupted. Sometimes the greatest success is measured not in dollars earned, but in lives changed. And sometimes, the wisdom you need most comes from the smallest voice, asking the simplest question, "Can you read this for me?" It's important. It was important. More important than any meeting, any deal, any achievement Marcus had ever pursued. And that made all the difference.